Welcome everyone. Today we are talking about one of the most brilliant, playful, and completely fearless minds in human history. We are talking about a man who didn't just passively learn science, he truly lived it. He was a man who helped build the very first atomic bomb. He was a man who won the Nobel Prize, a man who passionately played bongo drums, successfully cracked secret safes, bravely questioned authority, and completely refused to think like everyone else. His name was Richard Feynman. But here is exactly what makes his story so incredibly powerful. He was absolutely not born as a magical genius who simply knew everything. He was just a highly curious child. He was a boy who constantly asked questions. He was a boy who deeply loved to understand exactly how things worked, and he completely refused to accept easy answers without real proof. And that pure, simple curiosity eventually changed the entire world. Richard Feynman was born on May 11, 1918, in Queens, New York. His family was absolutely not rich. They were not professional scientists, and they were not famous. But his father was something very special. His father deeply believed in one highly powerful idea. It is not important to merely know the name of something. It is only important to understand exactly how it works. This single, beautiful idea shaped Richard's entire life forever. While other ordinary children simply memorized dry facts, Richard's father thoughtfully took him on quiet walks and asked him deep questions. To memorize means to carefully put something into your memory so you can repeat it, but it does not mean you truly understand it. His father would point to a small bird and wisely say, "You can know the name of that bird in many different languages, but do you actually know why it behaves the way it does?" That gentle lesson was incredibly powerful. Feynman learned very early in life that simply memorizing is absolutely not intelligence. True understanding is intelligence. He was never interested in merely repeating what his teachers said. He deeply wanted to know why. Why does light behave like that? Why do magnets strongly attract each other? Why do numbers work the exact way they do? He was never satisfied with simple, lazy answers. As a young teenager, Richard became quite famous in his local neighborhood for fixing broken radios. But here's the most interesting part. He didn't just randomly touch them and try to fix them. Instead, he would sit perfectly quietly. He would carefully listen. He would think incredibly deeply, and he would beautifully imagine the invisible flow of electricity inside his own mind. He could clearly see the hidden problem without even touching the physical device. At first, the people in his neighborhood thought it was pure magic. But it wasn't magic at all. It was highly logical thinking. He didn't panic, and he didn't blindly guess. He calmly analyzed the problem. That calm, clear thinking slowly became his ultimate superpower. You might mistakenly think he was absolutely perfect in school. No, he happily made mistakes. He was very playful, and he sometimes broke the strict rules. He joked around a lot, but when it finally came to physics and mathematics, his mental focus was intensely strong. He deeply loved solving hard problems, not because he desperately wanted good grades, but simply because he truly enjoyed the beautiful puzzle. He learned purely for joy, absolutely not for the approval of others, and that is exactly why his learning became so powerful. As he grew older, Richard went to MIT, the famous Massachusetts Institute of Technology. There, he began to study physics extremely seriously. But even at a brilliant school like MIT, he was completely different from everyone else. While the other smart students simply memorized highly complex mathematical formulas, Feynman tried to carefully rederive absolutely everything from scratch. To rederive from scratch means to start from the very beginning, using only basic logic, to build a complicated formula yourself. He would sit quietly and ask his own mind, if I didn't already know this formula, could I actually figure it out all by myself? That highly independent mindset made him vastly stronger than the other students. He was absolutely not lazily copying knowledge from a textbook. He was powerfully rebuilding it from the ground up inside his own brain, and doing that successfully creates true, undeniable mastery. During this busy time of studying, something else deeply beautiful happened in his life. He fell deeply and completely in love with a wonderful girl named Arlene Greenbaum. They had happily met when they were very young. They connected deeply emotionally. They laughed warmly together, and they truly understood each other's souls. But human life is rarely perfectly easy. Arlene tragically became seriously ill with a disease called tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a highly dangerous infection that deeply attacks the lungs, and it was incredibly deadly at that time in history. The serious doctors sternly warned Richard, "If you choose to marry her, your life will become incredibly difficult." But Richard completely didn't care about the heavy difficulty. He deeply loved her. He boldly proved that true love is infinitely stronger than cold fear. He proudly married her even though he clearly knew her illness was incredibly serious. This beautiful choice shows something vitally important about Richard Feynman. He was absolutely not just a cold, calculating scientist. He was a warm human being with incredibly deep emotions and fierce loyalty. After finishing his time at MIT, Feynman went to Princeton University to earn his PhD. He was very young, highly brilliant, endlessly curious, and full of bright energy, but the outside world was rapidly and violently changing. World War II had terribly begun, and the United States government was secretly working on a massive project that would completely change human history forever. It was called the Manhattan Project, a highly secret military mission to successfully build the world's very first atomic bomb. And Richard Feynman, who was still just a very young scientist, was officially invited to join. He didn't fully understand the heavy political consequences at that specific time. He was simply highly excited about solving massive, complex scientific problems. He deeply wanted to passionately push the laws of physics to their absolute limits. And that single fateful decision would soon place him directly at the center of one of the most powerful and highly controversial events in all of human history. Richard Feynman was still very young, only in his mid-20s, when he joined the Manhattan Project. In your mid-20s, most normal people are still simply trying to successfully understand life. But Feynman was about to actively help build the absolutely most powerful weapon the entire world had ever seen. The Manhattan Project was a highly secret military operation during World War II. The ultimate goal was completely clear but incredibly terrifying. The United States desperately needed to build the atomic bomb long before Nazi Germany could do it. If Germany successfully built it first, the entire world could easily change forever. That terrible fear naturally created massive urgency, and that extreme urgency heavily created huge pressure. Feynman quickly moved to Los Alamos, New Mexico, which was a highly secret laboratory hidden deep in the quiet desert. Scientists from all over the entire country were carefully brought there, meaning the absolute greatest minds of that specific time were secretly working together. A brilliant man named Robert Oppenheimer was strictly leading the massive project. Security in the secret desert was extremely strict. You could absolutely not tell anyone what you were actually doing. Personal letters were heavily censored, phones were constantly monitored, and people were carefully watched. To censor means to carefully examine letters or media and completely remove any secret or dangerous information. It was exactly like living inside a tense spy movie. But even inside this dark, highly secret world, Feynman was still perfectly himself, highly curious, wonderfully playful, and completely fearless. While seriously working on the destructive bomb, Feynman actually became quite famous not only for his brilliant physics, but for successfully cracking safes. Every single scientist had a heavy metal safe in their private office. Inside those locked safes were highly secret documents, important scientific calculations, and highly critical information. Feynman naturally became highly curious and simply wondered, how completely secure are these heavy safes really? So he quietly studied exactly how they physically worked. He did this absolutely not to lazily steal secrets or to playfully cause harm, but purely because he deeply loved understanding complex systems. And guess what? He surprisingly discovered that many of the heavy safes were very poorly secured. He would gracefully open the locked safes simply to boldly prove that the security wasn't nearly as strong as people blindly believed. He even playfully left funny notes inside some locked safes like, "I borrowed document number X." People were highly shocked and the serious security officers were highly embarrassed. But Feynman wasn't doing it to create silly chaos. He was simply exposing a dangerous weakness in the system. He strongly believed in objective truth over strict authority, even in a highly stressful, high-pressure military environment. At the secret Los Alamos laboratory, Feynman heavily worked on incredibly complex calculations. To successfully build a working atomic bomb, scientists absolutely had to fully understand exactly how tiny particles called atoms behave when they are violently split. When you carefully split certain atoms, they rapidly release enormous, terrible energy. But safely controlling that massive, violent reaction deeply required highly precise mathematics. Precise means perfectly exact and highly accurate, with absolutely no room for error. Feynman became heavily responsible for coordinating these extremely complex calculations. He brilliantly created efficient systems to make the difficult teamwork much more efficient, and he beautifully simplified complex problems to smoothly help others think clearly. He was absolutely not just purely smart, he was highly practical. He deeply believed that if you absolutely cannot explain something clearly to another person, you simply do not understand it deeply yourself. That brilliant idea smoothly became one of his core life philosophies. But sadly, while he was happily solving massive scientific puzzles, his human heart was silently breaking. His beautiful wife Arlene was slowly getting weaker. She was staying in a quiet hospital far away, and her dangerous tuberculosis disease was getting much worse. Feynman bravely visited her whenever he possibly could, even though serious people sternly warned him about the terrible risks, and even though the deadly disease was highly dangerous, he deeply loved her. And true love completely does not calculate cold risk the exact way strict science does. While the entire world was heavily focused on actively building the most destructive weapon in human history, he was silently watching the wonderful person he loved slowly fade away. That incredibly heavy emotional weight would easily break many normal people. But Feynman bravely continued, absolutely not because he was a cold, unfeeling machine, but simply because he carefully separated his deep emotions from his hard work when it was strictly necessary. He quietly carried his massive pain. In July 1945, the terrible bomb was finally completely ready. They safely tested it in the quiet desert, and this famous historic test was called Trinity. When it violently exploded, it suddenly created a massive flash of bright light and a highly powerful shock wave. A completely new, terrifying era officially began. Feynman later thoughtfully described that intense moment. He absolutely did not feel pure joy. He heavily felt something much more complicated. A dizzy mix of excitement, deep shock, and massive confusion. Soon after the successful test, real bombs were tragically dropped on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thousands of innocent people instantly died. The terrible war finally ended, and the human world was completely changed forever. Feynman later bravely admitted something highly important. At that specific time in the hot desert, he did absolutely not deeply think about the heavy moral consequences. Consequences are the serious results or terrible effects of a previous action. He was entirely focused purely on the fascinating science and on successfully solving the difficult problem. But much later in his life, he seriously reflected on it much more deeply. He fully realized exactly how incredibly powerful science can naturally be, and exactly how terribly dangerous it can actually be too. After the terrible war finally ended, something highly unexpected happened to Richard. Feynman felt empty. To feel empty means to have absolutely nothing inside, feeling completely hollow, sad, and tired in your human heart. He had tragically lost his beautiful Arlene in 1945. She sadly passed away just before the Great War officially ended. He lost the one person he truly loved the most in the entire world. The loud, violent war was officially over, and the big, secret mission was fully complete. But he felt absolutely no excitement, no happy joy, and no clear direction for his future. He once quietly said that after the terrible bomb, physics simply felt unimportant for a long while. He deeply questioned meaning. He deeply questioned his life's purpose. Purpose is the powerful reason why you do something, the deep, guiding meaning of your daily life. He quietly questioned absolutely everything. That quiet sadness shows something incredibly powerful to all of us. Even brilliant geniuses gracefully go through dark, cold seasons in their lives. Even highly successful people feel completely lost sometimes. Massive success does absolutely not protect you from deep emotional pain. After the war, Richard Feynman slowly began teaching young students at Cornell University. On a simple piece of paper, this perfectly looked like massive success. He was a highly respected scientist. He had bravely worked on the absolute most important military project of the entire war. He was known as brilliant, but inside his own mind he felt completely different. He felt deeply confused. He felt totally disconnected from the normal world. He sadly felt like his burning passion for beautiful physics had completely disappeared. And that realization is very important for us to learn. Even the greatest geniuses temporarily lose their motivation. But Feynman did absolutely not stay safely in that dark, lonely place forever. One quiet day in the university cafeteria, he saw something incredibly simple. A young student playfully threw a normal dining plate high into the air. The round plate was spinning quickly. It was wobbling. To wobble means to move unsteadily from side to side while spinning in a circle. It was beautifully dancing high in the air. Most ordinary people completely ignored it. But Feynman intently stared at it. He became highly curious, like a little boy again. He quietly asked his own mind, "How exactly is it wobbling?" He eagerly started calculating exactly how the plate was happily wobbling in the air. He did this strictly just for fun. There was absolutely no heavy pressure, no terrible war, no big military mission, and absolutely no expectation from the outside world. There was just pure, simple curiosity. And in that quiet moment, something magical returned to him. Deep joy. He warmly remembered exactly why he deeply loved physics in the first place. He loved it absolutely not for cheap fame, not for high power, and not for terrible war, but purely for the joy of curiosity. That small, simple moment safely brought his lost joy back. That quiet moment successfully restarted his entire scientific career. He realized something incredibly powerful that day. When you bravely remove heavy pressure and peacefully return to simple curiosity, your brilliant creativity naturally returns. Sometimes the absolute biggest comeback in a person's life simply begins with a very small spark. A spark is a tiny, bright flash of light that can slowly start a massive, warm fire. This perfectly simple spinning plate happily led him back to deep, passionate research. And that specific research would eventually successfully lead to something highly groundbreaking for the entire world. Now we enter a slightly more complex period of his life. Feynman began working intensely on exactly how light and physical matter interact with each other. In advanced physics, this difficult study is called quantum electrodynamics, often just called QED. To understand this, simply imagine light as tiny, invisible packets of pure energy called photons. These tiny photons constantly interact with other extremely tiny particles, like electrons. The big question for scientists was, how exactly do these invisible interactions happen? The advanced math behind it was extremely difficult, and many other brilliant scientists deeply struggled to figure it out. The traditional mathematical equations were terribly messy, highly confusing, and almost completely impossible to accurately manage. Equations are highly complex math sentences that use letters and numbers to show how things are equal. But Feynman had a beautifully different way of thinking about the world. Instead of eagerly writing complicated, long equations on a chalkboard, he simply drew pictures. Yes, he drew little pictures. He created beautifully simple diagrams to clearly represent how these tiny particles interacted with each other. Today, the entire scientific world respectfully calls them Feynman diagrams. These simple, elegant drawings successfully simplified extremely complex physics. They magically made it much easier for other frustrated scientists to fully understand exactly what was happening in the quantum world. He brilliantly turned highly abstract mathematics into beautiful visual storytelling. Abstract means something that exists only as a difficult idea in your mind, not as a physical object you can easily touch. That unique ability to draw was his true genius. He did not just solve the difficult problems, he completely changed exactly how people think about problems. Because of his beautiful, world-changing drawings, Richard Feynman won the highly famous Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 1965. He proudly shared this massive honor with two other brilliant scientists. The prestigious prize was officially given to them for their groundbreaking work on quantum electrodynamics. Winning a Nobel Prize was easily one of the absolute highest honors in the entire world of science. But here is exactly what makes this historic moment so incredibly powerful to learn from. He absolutely did not chase the Nobel Prize. He purely chased deep understanding. He simply loved solving difficult puzzles, and the Golden Prize naturally came to him later. That is a very big, important lesson for all of us. When you quietly focus on complete mastery, public recognition naturally follows you. But when you selfishly chase recognition first, true mastery often sadly disappears. After his time at Cornell University, Feynman moved to Caltech, the famous California Institute of Technology. This is exactly where he became truly legendary, but absolutely not in a normal, boring way. Most university professors are highly serious, very formal, and emotionally distant from their students. But Feynman was delightfully different. He warmly joked in his class, he bravely challenged his students, and he miraculously made highly complex ideas feel perfectly simple. He strongly believed that if you cannot correctly explain something in simple, everyday language, you simply do not truly understand it yourself. That deep philosophy became extremely famous. His university lectures were absolutely not boring. They were highly exciting. He could easily explain the absolute most complex physics in simple, everyday words. He absolutely did not try to sound arrogant or artificially intelligent. He humbly tried to make other ordinary people understand the world, and that desire to share is true intelligence. When he won the Grand Nobel Prize, many massive doors easily opened for him. He quickly received fancy invitations to elite events, exclusive scientific conferences, and high-status luxury dinners. But Feynman intensely did not like fake importance. He occasionally even refused to attend certain fancy events because he heavily felt they were based purely on human ego. He strongly disliked fancy titles. He deeply disliked strict hierarchy. Hierarchy is a system where people are ranked one above the other according to their power. He heavily disliked people pretending to be superior or better than others. He once said something incredibly powerful that we should all remember. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. That single brilliant sentence perfectly shows his true character. He respected honest curiosity much more than strict authority. He deeply believed in questioning absolutely everything, even questioning his own mind. There was also another fun side of Feynman that highly surprises many serious people. He deeply loved playing bongo drums. Yes, a highly respected Nobel Prize-winning physicist passionately played loud drums. He happily learned to play them during his exciting time traveling in Brazil. In the year 1986, something terrible happened that once again placed Richard Feynman directly at the center of human history. The famous Space Shuttle Challenger suddenly exploded very shortly after its launch into the sky. The entire nation of America was deeply shocked, and 7 brave astronauts tragically died that day. A special commission was quickly formed by the government to carefully investigate the exact cause of the terrible accident. A commission is a formal group of chosen experts who are officially ordered to discover the hidden truth about a serious problem. Richard Feynman was specifically chosen to safely be a member of this important group. Many powerful government officials nervously tried to hide the real embarrassing problem. But Feynman absolutely did not tolerate dishonesty. During a highly tense live television hearing, he brilliantly performed a beautifully simple experiment. He calmly took a small black piece of a rubber O-ring, which was a vital part of the space shuttle's rocket. He quietly put it into a small cup of ice water. He clearly showed the entire world exactly how the rubber quickly lost its flexibility in the cold temperature. Flexibility is the important ability to easily bend and stretch without breaking. He explained perfectly simply, the O-ring failed because of cold weather. He proved that this simple mechanical failure caused the massive explosion, and he did it right in front of millions of television viewers. He bravely exposed the honest truth, simple, clear, and incredibly powerful. That unforgettable moment showed his true character once again. He always chose honest truth over reputation, and he always chose clear clarity over dirty politics. He absolutely did not care about strict power structures. He only cared about the cold facts. Later in his busy life, Feynman was sadly diagnosed with serious cancer, but even while bravely facing his own painful death, he remained incredibly curious. He constantly asked his doctors difficult questions, and he deeply studied his own medical condition. He calmly approached his deadly illness exactly like a scientist. When he clearly knew the end was very near, he said something completely unforgettable. "I would hate to die twice. It's so boring." Even in the dark face of death, he beautifully kept his warm humor. He peacefully passed away on February 15, 1988, when he was 69 years old. But his brilliant mind never truly left us. His famous lectures, his wonderful books, his bright ideas, and his elegant diagrams continue teaching millions of people today. As Richard Feynman grew older, something highly interesting happened to him. He became much more than just a smart physicist. He beautifully became a symbol. He was absolutely not a symbol of flawless perfection, and he was not a symbol of cold seriousness. He was a pure symbol of human curiosity, and that is incredibly powerful because curiosity is something anyone in the world can slowly develop. You absolutely don't need to be born a magical genius. You simply need to ask much better questions. One of Feynman's absolute greatest legacies was not his Golden Nobel Prize. A legacy is the beautiful, lasting impact or the powerful knowledge that a person leaves behind for the world after they die. His true legacy was his teaching. At Caltech, he gave a famous series of lectures that later proudly became known as the Feynman Lectures on Physics. These magical lectures were not written like a normal boring textbook. They were completely alive. He brilliantly explained hard physics in simple, everyday language. He would carefully break down highly complex ideas into small, easily understandable parts. Over time, eager people began to talk about a powerful learning method called the Feynman technique. It is a simple, beautiful learning method directly inspired by him. The powerful idea has 4 easy steps. 1. Learn something new. 2. Try to carefully explain it in simple language, exactly as if you are cheerfully teaching a young child. 3. Find exactly where you struggle to explain it. 4. Go back and quietly study that specific part again. If you cannot explain it simply, you simply do not understand it deeply. This beautiful technique forces complete clarity. It perfectly removes dangerous illusion. An illusion is a false idea or a tricky belief that is not actually true. It destroys fake, shallow knowledge. Feynman deeply hated pretending. He once wisely said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." That one single sentence alone can completely change your life. Richard Feynman teaches us something far beyond simple physics. He teaches us exactly how to think. He gently teaches us, do not memorize blindly. Do not accept strict authority without asking a question. Do not ever pretend to understand. And please, do not ever stop being beautifully curious. If you quietly study Feynman's life carefully, you clearly see a beautiful pattern. He absolutely did not try to casually become a famous legend. He simply tried his best to fully understand the natural world. And in doing that simple thing, he naturally became a legend. That is the beautiful paradox of true greatness. A paradox is a highly confusing situation that seems impossible because it contains 2 opposite facts. When you finally stop selfishly chasing greatness and start humbly chasing pure understanding, true greatness often naturally follows you. Richard Feynman did not just brilliantly explain the dark universe, he wonderfully showed us exactly how to happily explore it with brave courage, with endless curiosity, and with massive joy. And that is exactly why his beautiful story still deeply matters today.